We are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral grounds of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, from where we continue to celebrate the works of authors we know and love with readings, discussions, and forums moving into the fall season. Tonight, we are delighted to have back in the house Maurice Carlos Ruffin, celebrating his new short fiction collection titled The Ones Who Don't Say They Love You, published by One World Books, which is an awesome publisher. It's been putting out quality work for some time now. So always happy to feature their books. Mr. Ruffin is a really amazing storyteller and wordsmith who hails from New Orleans, and many of his stories beautifully capture and are really deeply rooted in New Orleans culture. We've been huge fans of his work here at City Lights, so we're thrilled to have him with us again. He is the author of We Cast a Shadow, which was a finalist for the Penn Faulkner Award, the Penn Open Book Award, and the Dayton Literary Peace Prize, and longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize and International Dublin Literary Award. His work has appeared in the Virginia Quarterly Review, in AGNI, in the Kenyon Review, the Massachusetts Review, and the wonderful Unfathomable City, the New Orleans Atlas. He is a recipient of the Iowa Review Award in Fiction. Mr. Ruffin continues to make his home in New Orleans. Joining him tonight in conversation, we are honored to have with us Zakiya Dalila Harris. She is the author of the novel, The Other Black Girl. Her reputation in the book world has preceded her, as we have known about her for many years here at City Lights because of her work in editorial over at Knopf and Doubleday before leaving to write her debut novel. So prior to working in publishing, Ms. Harris received her MFA in creative writing from the New School. Her essays and book reviews have appeared in such places as Cosmopolitan, Guernica, and The Rumpus. So please join us now in giving a warm welcome to Maurice Carlos Ruffin and Zakiya Dalila Harris. Welcome to City Lights Live.
I promise you I'm clapping for Zakiya, not myself right now.
No, you should be clapping for yourself, Maurice. We'll clap for all of us for being here tonight.
Well, thank you for doing this. I love your earrings, by the way.
Thank you. They have little trees on them, actually. I discovered this a couple years after I started wearing them.
Okay.
Better than ever. How you feeling?
I'm feeling great. It's so wonderful to put a book out into the world. I posted on Twitter today that every time a book makes it into the world, it's a miracle, and it's wonderful to watch. Your work in the world this year, which your book has just taken over, which I love so much, and to be putting my second book out, it just feels like a dream.
Oh, thank you. It's a dream for me to be here, everyone. Y'all, if you haven't picked up a copy of this book, please pick up a copy. It is amazing. So before we get into our Q&A, do you want to start us off, Maurice, with a little something, a little reading?
Yeah. Peter, who's kind of a genius, suggested we might break some of the reading up because my pieces are pretty short. So I'm going to read something very briefly here, and then if we want to get back to some more reading later on, we can do that. By your leave, Captain Zakiya. So I'm going to read a short piece. Of course, as a New Orleans person, we always have music to introduce stuff. So I'll tell you about this piece. It's called Mercury Forges. And this is one of those flash fiction pieces that I wrote that was really just from something very simple. I met a man named Mercury Forges in 2004. Don't know anything about this guy at all, even today, but that name was so evocative. I had to make a narrative for him. So this story is called Mercury Forges, and it's set literally during Katrina. Give me a moment. Mercury Forges. My job was to make sure Mercury didn't escape. He was a stocky black guy in for drugs and guns. He'd gotten out of the Orleans Parish prison twice, and no one knew how he did it. And the funny thing is, he got captured within a few blocks of the prison both times. I get turned around, I get out there, Deputy Benoit, Mercury said once, but I'll get free for good. Just you wait. When the hurricane hit and flooded everything, We brought the inmates out to the Broad Street overpass. I wasn't too panicked because one of the other deputies, Ronnie Dismas, said our families had made it out of town before the water came in from that hurricane. It'd be easy to look after myself with my family out of harm's way. Wouldn't you know it, Mercury snuck away as soon as I turned my back. He was in a pirogue about 5 blocks away, bobbing on the water like an apple. I ran across the overpass and climbed down some scaffolding to his boat, which I grabbed. We hadn't cuffed any of the inmates. It would have been impossible to move those guys with all the climbing we had to do to get to dry land. Where do you think you're going? I asked. I had my hand on my sidearm. I gotta find Humanity Street, he said. That's where my pops lives. Now I knew his dad, a good guy who delivered food plates to us deputies for lunch. I liked his dad, but that shouldn't have mattered at that moment. I can't really tell you why I didn't make him bring us back to the detention area. And after a while, we floated up to a yellow house with flood water almost to the awning. Mercury yanked the metal pole from the water, broke through the attic window, and climbed in. There was shuffling inside, and I wondered if I should go in after him. I thought this might be part of his big getaway plan. But soon, he grunted out of the window and pulled his father's body out wrapped in a heavy blanket. The old man hadn't had a chance. Bring us back, Dep, said Mercury. And that was what I did. And that's Mercury Forges. And I'm going to read one more flash piece. These pieces are only about a page or so. They make up about almost half of the book. And one thing I enjoy writing flash fiction is that it gives you a chance to really hop around throughout your community and show different perspectives. This piece is called Cocoon. And one of the reasons why I pick certain songs is because with Mercury Forges, I remember being in town after the hurricane, and even though the power was out, you could still hear music like that playing all around town. So similar situation with Cocoon. Here we go. My father named his bug company Stevens & Son. Even before I came in the world, I found insects disgusting. But it was just me and him, so I did my best to keep my objections hidden. And I certainly never told him about my proclivities. You see, I was a pretty good bug man in my teens and could tell what infestation was present by the faintest clues. Teeny tiny scratch marks on a pantry shelf or a sign of a mouse, for instance. And whenever we came across something we'd never seen before, like that bellows-shaped mud nest in Mrs. Berthelot's attic, I was the first to guess. Nearly always right. They were mud wasps. The males sipped nectar on swamp azaleas, while the females built houses with their mouths. Still, I grew tired of spending my weekends hunting vermin. My father was in his 60s and needed someone who could really put his back into the work. And that's why he hired Tyrone Myers. Tyrone was into it. I had the impression that he had lived a hard life somewhere else. Yet whenever I asked him about his past, he just placed a hand on my shoulder, a situation I very much enjoyed, and chuckled. Can't stay wrapped in what you come from, he'd say. I was in my bedroom one night, alone, I thought, when I sensed Tyrone near the door. I don't know if he saw me in front of my mirror in a calico dress I'd bought at the thrift store on Carrollton Avenue. Quickly, I switched off the lamp, slipped on jeans in the dark, and left the house to meet my friends. The next morning, I quit. My father showed no emotion, but he took sick a year later and sold the company to Tyrone. Years after I moved to New York to pursue a career in fashion design, I went back home. Tyrone never changed the name of the company. To my surprise, he didn't seem shocked to see me with hair extensions and wearing a crinkled suede waistcoat of my own creation. He invited me into the house he was servicing to show me something he had found. He stooped and gave me a ghostly thing, lighter than a feather, and so thin the lines on the palm of my hand were clearly visible through it. Do you know what that is? He asked. It's what moths come from, I said. I'll stop there for now.
Oh my goodness, Maurice. I love listening to you read. I reread this book multiple times, and listening to you read and reading along with my copy, I heard even more than I heard before. I hear the subtleties, the nuances, because you write with so much depth and so many different voices that kind of all merge into one. And I mean, Humanity Street, honestly, in that first story you read, Mercury Forges, like ding, ding, ding was going off in my head. So thank you so much for reading. Before we dive in, I want to remind everyone to please put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. Yeah, in the chat, sorry. And we're just going to dive right into it. So first, Maurice, before we get into all the questions I have for you, can you tell us just a little bit about this book and your journey to getting to this book? I know the first line in your acknowledgements, I'm going to the end of your book for a second, but the first line in your acknowledgements says that the ones who don't say they love you span more than a decade of your life. So I'd love to hear you just expand on that and bring us into your world.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you again for doing this, Zakiya. And thank you to City Lights for hosting us. It's good to see my old friend Tyne out there and many other friends in the audience, including Dr. Jerry West. I see you as well, and many other people that I've interacted with. Hey, Eric, I see you out there as well. I'll keep saying hello throughout this event, I'm sure. But I mean, you know, me saying that is true to my journey. I think all writers have a kind of hero's journey, which is there's a challenge. You're not sure if you want to accept it. Maybe you reject the challenge. Something draws you out. You decide to step out. You meet a few mentors and a few peers. You make some gains. You get knocked down, and then you have to decide where you keep on going. And those of us who are lucky enough to actually write our books and publish our books kind of get to the end of that hero's journey, hopefully intact, hopefully feeling good about it. I feel good about it. When I started writing the stories in this book, I was still a practicing corporate lawyer. I'm in my 40s now. I think I was in my 20s when I started the first story in here. And you know, early on, like many novice writers, like many amateurs, I didn't know if I really was going to be a writer at all. I just wanted to just play around and write as a hobby almost. And at some point, I sort of asked myself, you know, dude, you've been like playing around with writing things for your entire life. First, when will you get serious about it? And what would it take you to get serious about it? And I look around my hometown, New Orleans. That's one of the most famous cities on earth. I always say it's a world city. People, you know, there's somebody somewhere on the other side of the planet right now saying, one day I want to visit New Orleans. You know, not every city has that reputation. And I realized that even though we are known for our culture, our food, our music, our way we dress, way we talk, our entire culture, the literary sort of capacity of this city has been limited in some ways. We're majority Black. We have been for most of our history. And yet because of things like mass incarceration and other racial economic issues, people who would have become writers didn't have a chance, for various reasons. They get put in jail, they die young, they can't have enough disposable income or free time to write. And I kept thinking, Maurice, whenever you write a story, you're kind of writing it on behalf of people who don't have a chance to tell their own stories. And I felt like that there was some hubris in that, but I also said, if you don't write these stories, they will never get written. And I always say this publicly because I want to be challenged on it. I've studied and I've asked questions of people who I respect about other books that are similar. And I think that with a book like this one, This was a collection of short stories published by a Black person from New Orleans by a national publisher. There are not many books like this that exist in history. And so I just feel a certain level of like responsibility and joy as well. And I was delighted to see earlier, so the book's been reviewed by New York Times and the LA Times, which is great. But I was really excited because the Root put in a word for it today on the website, and they listed it under YA, which I was kind of shocked by, but not shocked by, because I think half of the main characters are young people, like under, high school or under. And, certainly, the book itself is dedicated to the children of New Orleans. And I feel like my grand hope is that young people will read this book who are from this city, and it will inspire them to write their own stories. Because I shouldn't be the only voice out here. There's so many people telling their own stories.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, wow. Okay, I have so many questions off of that. Okay, well, first of all, full disclosure, I'm a Yankee. I'm from Connecticut. I've never been to New Orleans. So bring us into New Orleans a little bit more. I know you mentioned, nothing like this collection really exists, which is baffling to me, but also I'm just curious why you think that is, and what are the things that, sorry, I'm a two-parter, three-parter, five-parter question person, so don't feel like you have to answer all this at once, but like, I'm curious about just New Orleans as a city. Like, what is it that New Orleans gives us culturally and spiritually, gives the world that other cities don't give us, and why? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful question. And I see like some Twitter buddies out there. My goodness, I see Troy. What's up, Troy? I see Mahmoud. Hello, how you doing? Genevieve. Hey, Gar, you're not Twitter. You're San Francisco. But anyway, it's good to see you out there as well. So what does New Orleans give? Well, I mean, the way I look at it is that, this is going to sound obvious, but I'm a great lover of honesty. And so this is going to sound bizarre, but I guess as a writer, part of your job is to sort of say things that are like provocative, controversial, but maybe they're true. So our previous president, who I will not name, I will not evoke his name.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah.
You can say what you want to about that person, but there was a weird honesty to it that sort of drew out people's darker angels on that side of the spectrum, which I really liked. I'm like, he's just saying the thing out loud, and I really appreciated that. I was tired of his predecessors on that side, sort of, dog whistling and saying things between the lines. I'm like, no, this guy's telling the truth.
Yeah.
I think New Orleans is strange. People come to this city and they always say, I don't understand why it feels so unique. Why is the energy so specific to this city? Well, some young person a few years ago printed this shirt up that became like iconic. And it simply says, everything you love about New Orleans is because of Black people.
Yes.
And what it's really saying in a very brash way is that, if you look at a lot of the advertising, just go like to the Convention Center's Bureau for the state of Louisiana or for New Orleans, you'll see like a lot of sort of cheesy iconography, people playing trumpets and that kind of stuff. But you really won't see a lot of New Orleans icons, like Black icons. And what's hidden in that is the fact that, Black folks in this city, many of us are descended from Haiti, which means that they're descended from people who were actually revolutionaries. If they fought for their freedom, it's still, the only free Black nation in the Western Hemisphere, yada, yada, yada. And so I think what happens is that even though we have some sort of top layer issues with poverty and illiteracy, beneath that, within the homes of the people that I know in my community, my family, my friends, there is this feeling of strength of you can't destroy us. People will, they will talk how they talk, they're gonna eat how they eat, they're gonna think how they're gonna think. You can't change that regardless of these policies that have been so pervasive. And my thought has always been that if you combine New Orleans with our sister city, Atlanta, which is one of the other sort of major Black cities in America, Atlanta's like the sort of finances and like the sort of high style. We're like the sort of food and sort of, gritty ground level culture. These two cities together is like Wakanda. It's like some of the greatest Black power on earth. You can do a lot of things with these two cities joined hand in hand. So I just think that, to put my point on it, it's the Blackness, it's the Caribbeanness, it's the Africanness. These things still persist in this town. When we're talking about the way that we think and dress and talk, about our ancestors, about the way that the sort of political forces move, it's just all there. And it can't be washed away even by, policies that are designed to destroy people in the city.
Yeah, and we see that in every one of these stories too. I mean, that sense of pride, unbridled pride, and it's beautiful. And each of the characters in this collection, and how it's passed down too, generation to generation. I saw that also throughout this collection. And yeah, I think you should be the spokesperson for Norman's, honestly. Like, you should be the one who's waiting for everybody, just telling them, because like I feel the love for your city coming from the Zoom. And I know everyone can feel it here tonight. So thank you for sharing that. And this makes me think of another, I'm going off of like Q&A now, but I read your essay for Lit Hub recently, and there's a quote that I was just like, oh, I don't really even think I have a question for this, but you say, I write as a conductor, not as a performer. I rarely hear my own voice on the page. Instead, I make space for all the other voices. So can you tell me a little bit about where those voices came from? So I heard you say just now that one of your stories you started writing when you were in your 20s, right? How do you set about going into this story? Like, do you start with characters and then go into the plot? I know you mentioned for the first story you read, oh my goodness, Mercury Forges, you met a man who then inspired you to write this story. So I'm just curious, is that how all of your stories went, or was it a much more gradual kind of, process of some things worked that way and other times you just are like, I know what I have to say about this situation?
That's a great question. Yeah, and it's funny because when I wrote that piece for Lit Hub, I was challenging myself to not say what I had told my friends about how I sort of hear my stories. Normally, what I would say is I'll sit down and I'll start writing, and it won't feel quite right. And then I will sort of like almost perform like a sort of seance. I'll listen to the voices, and I kind of go, who is the proper voice for this story? But the conductor thing is more probably akin to what winds up happening once I discover the voices. Once I know that, Mercury Forges are going to sound one way, the young man in Cocoon is going to sound a different way, and I can sort of say, okay, you're going to play like this, and you're going to play louder, you're going to play faster. That Mercury Forges is the oldest story in the collection. That one I started maybe as early as 2007, and it took about 5 years to write that story. And the reason why is because as a novice writer, I was thinking from the outside in. I was thinking, well, I like the way that this writer sounds in this story. I want to try and mimic the way that their voice sounds because, quiet is kept. And then also in reality, I would have been an actor instead of a writer because I like to sort of mimic and act out things. And so I wrote that story. And it's funny because I've been laughing because with my first book, I feel like a lot of the critics didn't understand the sort of subtext of it. But with this book, both in the New York Times and in the Garden and Gun and the LA Times, they both pointed out that Mercury Forges is built on the foundation of William Faulkner's Dry September. The quick version of that is, this is a classic story about a bunch of white guys who falsely accuse a black man of raping a white woman. You know how that's going to turn out. It sort of writes itself. And so I decided, write the reverse version of that. So I had a black group of guys going to beat up a white guy. And it was okay. It wasn't that great, the early version of it. And then as I started listening, I'm like, well, Maurice, it's post-Katrina. What's really going on in New Orleans right now? One of our major tensions, unfortunately, back then was we had a lot of Latinx immigrants coming in to help rebuild the city. And they were doing a great job, but there was tension between a lot of the young black guys who would want to get these jobs. And so I decided to make the main characters younger, like high school age, and make their sort of opponents, these Latinx dudes. And when I did that, the voice just sprung out. It's like, yes, this guy is a young kid who's in high school, who's part of this sort of gang. He's in trouble. He has like an ankle bracelet on, and they shot his best buddy, and they want to get revenge for their buddy. And so it's just a matter of like listening, kind of going, what is real in New Orleans? Not what's real in general. What's real in this place at this time, and then sort of following that voice along its path.
I can relate to that so hard. Because when you're trying to make it work, right, and you have this idea of what the story is going to be shaped like. It almost never, maybe it goes that way for people, I don't know, but like I find that can be so liberating, right? Like when you change that piece, and that what if game can be so much fun. And yeah, I loved both of the stories you read. Cocoon was, a lot of them, all of them were my favorites. Cocoon was one of the ones that I loved a lot. But another one that I really loved was Token. And I was hearing a little bit, I was of course hearing your voice, but I couldn't help but of course think of Girl by Jamaica Kincaid. So I'm reading it, I read it again, I'm like, this is so real, but also like, I have to ask him this question. And I kept going through the book and I was like, no, like I'm not gonna ask him that. But then in the very last story, before I let go, Galia, am I pronouncing her name? Galia's daughter, right, tells her, I know how to say, or I can't remember what it was, but Jamaica Kincaid is referenced in that last story. And
Yes.
so I had to ask you, first of all, was that intentional for Token? Were you channeling that voice and those spirits? And were there any other voices you were channeling while you were writing these stories?
Oh yeah, that's a wonderful question. Thank you. I mean, there's so many Black women writers who are influential in my life, who have made me who I am. And I remember when I read that. So here's the thing about it. You know, I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world. I remember being an undergrad and being an English major and reading stories in my lit classes and just not understanding the vast majority of them. You give me some, I don't know, Faulkner, Hemingway, I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. What is, you know, even like my later favorites, you know, Melville, the book of, I just didn't get it back then. But when I read Girl, it's like a 19-year-old kid, I was like, I totally understand this. And it's one of the most widely anthologized pieces in history. You see it everywhere. It's in all the big books. And I later learned that there's a whole subgenre. It's hard to track them down. But for example, there's a writer I know who is like, he's a white male who lives in Appalachia. He writes like an Appalachian version of Girl. So it's like a 3-page story about this guy like off in the woods talking to his dad.
Oh, cool.
So it's such a wonderful concept. It just the framing works so well. And I have to say this. So for those of you who don't know, I blurbed Zakiya's wonderful book, her bestseller. I was privileged to read this months ahead of everybody else. And I feel like we're all like joined in hands, because I kept thinking, like, there's this person in office who's having this problem, and my first book is kind of is a similar milieu, but we're all like holding hands with people like Kincaid and Toni Morrison and others. So to me, it all loops together. There's no Token, you know, without, you know, works like Girl, or even We Cast a Shadow. I couldn't have written that without something like Girl. And so just for me, it was very simple. Like, you know, she gave me this sort of instruction manual, and I kind of went, all right, I'm going to try the same thing. There's somebody talking to somebody else, and they're having a conversation, and there's this sort of stress about identity and what feels fair in personhood.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And when you really, I have never thought of it that way. I remember I think I also read Girl at 19. I took a creative writing class in college, and I remember feeling exactly the same way, to be honest. It was for a writing class though. And that story stood out to me so much because that's why, now that I'm thinking about it, it's so translatable. And when you distill it down to its purest, what that story is, it is identity. It is also voice too. And trying to show someone the way. I really love that. I'm really excited too that my Jamaica Kincaid laser beam was correct.
Very accurate.
Very accurate. Yes, thank you. So microfiction, flash fiction. I have to ask you, have you always been interested in flash fiction? Like, I can't say, okay, first of all, full disclaimer, I am very scared of writing a short story. Like, I love reading them, but they seem really daunting and seem hard. Like, I'm not gonna lie. So what drew you to writing flash fiction? How did the skills that you have to use for flash fiction, which I'll say is 1,000 words, right, roughly or less, versus the longer short stories that you have in the book?
Yeah, no, first of all, you shouldn't be afraid of writing short stories, even if they are, in my opinion, harder to write than a novel. Having written a novel, I can honestly say that a great short story is like a Swiss watch. The pieces have to fit together perfectly in order to operate properly. And people sort of get discouraged when they can't, like, they sort of feel like, oh, this will be a lot easier. No, short stories are very hard. And I think, again, like, I don't know if I'm like the greatest writer in the world, but I do know that I'm good at sort of like analyzing things. And when I was really struggling as a newer writer, one thing I did was my mentor at the time, a guy named James Nolan, who's a local, gave me a book of, there's like an anthology of short stories. It was either New Stories from the South or Best American Short Stories or the Ohan Henry Prize Stories, one of those collections. And one of the stories in there was by Paul Theroux, who's now in his 70s. And it was called 22 Stories. And it was basically like 22 one-page, micro-fiction pieces where the voices were all unique, the point of view was unique, even the stories were unique, and yet somehow they all added up to a sort of overarching story. And so me being a nerd, I sort of analyzed, I'm like, what is he doing in these stories? And I was like, oh, there's a formula here he's doing. It's like, there's a setup, there's like a complication, there's an ironic twist, and there's a conclusion. And so I'm not a coffee drinker, but when I drink coffee, I go crazy. So I remember one day, 2009 or 10, I went to the coffee shop and had like 3 shots of coffee and said, I'm gonna write as many flash pieces today as I possibly can. I wrote between like 20 and 40 flash pieces.
That's amazing.
It was crazy. It was totally insane. But what I learned was, first of all, many of those stories stood on their own. It's like Mercury Forges is one of those original stories from maybe 10 years ago now. Some of the stories begged to be expanded. They became short stories, And then some of the stories are still percolating in my head. They become like scenes and other things. They became like a part of We Cast a Shadow or my present book that I'm writing, my 3rd book. And so for me, if anything, I'm always trying to experiment, trying to figure out what I don't understand and have a good time. And just like with a flash story, to me, you can have really good time. Last thing I'll say is my professor, who I love, my mentor at UNO, my MFA program, Barb Johnson, who's my director of my thesis, who's a genius. She did not like flash at all. So when I turned him in my class, she was like, what are you doing? You can't do that in this class. But to my credit, I have to, toot my horn. Eventually, she turned around and began assigning flash to all her students after me, saying, you've got to write some of these to train yourself. So I'm like, all right, mission accomplished. It's just a great training tool.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm going to steal that idea. I'll have to have 6 shots though. Like my tolerance is dangerous right now. So definitely inspired me to do that. Well, so actually that was another one of my questions too. And thank you so much, everyone. I see these questions and comments in the chat. Love to see it. Keep them coming. We'll switch to questions and I guess maybe in like 15 minutes after you do another reading. But were there characters or stories or situations that you wanted to stay with longer than you did in terms of like when you were still in the early stages? I mean, you kind of answered that, but I'm curious, like, is there one that you were particularly fond of, or even just what's your favorite story? Any of those.
Well, it's funny because I think as a creative person, you never know what's going to come out. Like I remember Kendrick Lamar was saying how when he raps, he never knows what kind of energy is going to come out of his mouth.
Right.
So I tried to write a novel back in 2010 based on this Pie Man stories. I love that character, Baby, so much. He's such a New Orleans kid.
Oh
His
my
part
God.
is so, I just love him so much, right? So
So
I remember
good.
said, Maurice, do NaNoWriMo. And I'm so, I pushed back a lot. I'm like, I don't want, it sounds silly. I finally gave in, but me being me, I did it in June instead of November. And so I just wrote like 170 pages of this kid from Pie Man. And I did it, and I was kind of like, it doesn't feel quite right. I don't think he wants to have his own book. So it was a good lesson for me. One, it taught me I could write fast, like write a book in a month.
Wow.
But it also taught me that I shouldn't be like forcing things. It doesn't feel right. Leave it alone. So definitely that kid. There's a story at the end of the book, which is the longest one. It's the novelette. Before I Let Go. I would give her 1,000 pages if I could. I mean, Galia, she has such a big life and personality, and she's a very New Orleans woman. I just want to see her all the time. But I gave her 40 pages, which is a lot. So
Yeah. Oh man, that last scene in the Pie Man story, the last moment is so vivid. The imagery, I'm thinking about it. That's why I can't speak. I think everybody, again, pick up this collection just to know what I'm talking about. There's an image, I won't spoil it. It's just really good. It's such a great story. And in terms of, okay, I'm getting into craft again because I'm so curious about this world, because this is new to me in a lot of ways. I don't get to talk to short story writers very often. So I'm so curious in terms of the structure of this, right? So you mentioned we have the novelette at the end with Galia, which, oh, so devastating, such a beautiful, complex, a little, I'm not gonna say messy, because I feel like messy is too much of a blanket term, but she's just complex and has a lot going on. So we have the novelette at the end, and then the first story we have a sex worker, right? And we have this story that, in a lot of ways for me, they both mirrored each other very well. Both made me think, I mean, the entire collection makes me think about place, but especially made me think about place and leaving and staying and all of those complicated feelings. And so I'm wondering how you structured this collection. Were you really intent on making sure you had certain stories next to each other? Because I know when I was reading, it was an interesting experience because they're not, the flash fiction is not all next to each other. It breaks it up, which I love, because sometimes it's like running for me. I can't run a full mile. So yeah, how did that come about for you?
Well, first of all, Zakiya, if you come to New Orleans, we can run together. I'll be happy.
Yes.
Your escort out there.
I know. I see your videos on Instagram. I'm like, how does he, first of all, how does he have time? It must be good though. Clears the headspace and allows you to write.
It does. I often write when I'm running. Like if I get twisted on an idea, I would think of there's just like more blood in your brain, which is probably a good thing, you know?
Yeah.
But I have to give credit to my fantastic editor, Nicole Counts, who was like the executive producer of this book. And she was the one who decided the order of things. And I think her ordering was brilliant. It's like a mixtape, things should flow a certain kind of way. And she was kind of, you're going to have the title story first, because it's a stunner. It's going to hit them really hard. They're going to kind of get into it like, oh, what's going on? And it does that. And then on top of that, I thought it was appropriate to have the longest story at the end, because I've read many collections where, where there's this big story in the middle. It's kind of like, where did it come from? And as you get like distracted, you get like put off and you don't come back to it. So I kept thinking, what, if you have made it through this book, you really want to get to the end of this, you're gonna read the entire story. And also, I think the other thing about Galia's story at the end of the book, in a weird way, her story kind of encompasses all the moves and all the problems before that. So there's like some love relationships, some family, some crime, some money issues, housing things going on, there's parades. So it's almost like everything happens earlier happens in that one story by itself. So it compiles the entire book together.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. And can I ask, in terms of the title too, I mean, what made you land on the ones you don't say they love you? I have to imagine there are other, I mean, this one's so perfect, and I do really feel like it encompasses the entire collection in a very interesting and thoughtful way. But I'm curious if was there like a whole kind of list of titles that you had to go through, or did it just come to you?
It's funny, for We Cast a Shadow, I had like probably pages and pages of titles for this book.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But with this one, I only had like 2. And I give them credit where credit is due, as you can tell. My classmate in grad school, a writer named Yoon, who's from Korea, she was a wonderful title maker. I mean, I would get her stories in class and go, why are her titles so good?
Those are good friends to have.
Oh my goodness. I mentioned one of her stories. The title was 1 in 10 Fish Can't Swim. I mean, just great titles, right? Yeah. It's so evocative. And so with this book, it was going to be either this title or maybe one of my other short stories is called City of New Orleans, or The City of New Orleans. Oh, excuse me, The Children of New Orleans. But funny enough, that story's not in the book. We cut it for various reasons. It's more of a sci-fi story. So when that happens, like, what, this got to be it. And I love these kinds of titles because as a sentence, they make a statement, you ask a question, you got to stop and read it for a moment. And really, I think it does fit like all the stories in here. Really, they all are about love in different kinds of ways.
Yeah, definitely. And I also see, I mean, because I also had the thought, I was like, well, it's interesting that New Orleans isn't in the title, but it is all in this book. It's in the epigraph by Ellis Marsalis, which I loved, which I will read. In New Orleans, culture doesn't come down from on high, it bubbles up from the street. So you set us up so beautifully. And of course, the dedication as well, which is also beautiful. Well, I think it seems like we have lots of questions. So I want you to have a chance to read again before we take some more questions. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, it sounds good to me. Let me see what I should read. I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time tonight. I know
Oh,
people
no.
have either just had dinner, you're gonna have dinner.
I could
mean,
listen to you read this. You didn't do did you do the audiobook?
actually, I didn't. I was lucky, very fortunate that they actually got two different readers, one a female reader and a male reader. And my goodness, they just
Oh.
knocked it all the way out the park. I mean, I'm so happy.
That's amazing. I gotta check that out. I gotta say, you though, hearing you read again, the stories just come alive even more. So thank you. I'm really excited that we get to hear you read another bit.
All right, I think I'm going to take your suggestion and read Token.
Yes.
Give me a moment. Token. Get to the office by 6 a.m. each morning. Never leave before sunset. Wear a suit and tie even on Fridays. Rock a bow tie and wear non-prescription glasses so they believe you have a brain. Speak only when spoken to, but be sure to respond because the last thing you want to be is a quiet one. They fear the quiet ones. When you look in the mirror, be sure to only see a sliver of yourself. Keep your car washed and your shoes mirror shining. Be mocha skin. Be walnut. Be milk chocolate. Let them consume you. And wipe their mouths with dirty linen. But don't associate with the Negroes who work around the building, the security guards in their pressed white short sleeve shirts, the baggy pants wearing maintenance workers, the errand boys and food deliverers. Don't let them connect you to any of those who look like you. Because one of you is desirable, but more than one of you is a rebellion. Never talk about Confederate monuments, police shootings, or protests. When you look in the mirror, never find more than a drop of yourself. If you want to sell out smart. But I'm not a sellout, so much as a double agent. This is how you drive to work. This is how you place your hands at 2 and 10 o'clock. This is how you erect perfect posture in the elevator. This is how you greet your betters, which is everyone with white skin. You eat lunch at your desk, but always with the door closed. If they see you bite a hamburger or shovel fries into your pink mouth, they have a vision of savages with nose rings. They can wear nose rings. You cannot. Never eat fried chicken on a workday because they'll smell it on your smile. This is how you smile at your boss who called you soulful. This is how you smile at the descendant of a man who said, segregation now, segregation forever. This is how you smile when they call you by the name of another Black person. Always go to the bathroom stall and always shut the door. Never get caught next to one of the men at a urinal. They won't look past the divider at what you hold, but they will wonder about what you hold and whether it belongs to a person or an animal. They may look for a tail. And you too will wonder, even with your firsthand knowledge. When you look in the mirror, find a mask, always a mask. Don't talk to the other people who wear suits and look like you. They can look like you, but like the white people better. Don't play golf. Your name is not Tyler, and you are not white. But if you must play golf, do not agree to caddy, and do not beat your betters. Comfort them with cheerful conversation. Tell all who will listen how grateful and lucky you are to be on the team. This is how you appear to be twice the man you are. This is how you make hand motions that soothe. This is how you take a blow beneath your belt and fall to the parched earth. This is how you stay down and laugh it off. This is how you get up and let them pat your skull.
Oh, I feel like what you were talking about earlier about us like all holding hands. Like I feel like whenever I was writing my book, this essay, I don't know, like some bolt of lightning was going through, because I just, especially that second guessing yourself of looking in the mirror and being like, am I actually like that? When you're being told you are something, after a while, you know, you have to make that decision if you're going to
Nella,
listen. Thank
I mean,
you.
I'm feeling her so much.
Thank you, Maurice. In the line also, because one of you is desirable, but more than one of you is a rebellion. Hello. Thank you so much for reading again. That was amazing. All right, so I'm going to go through some of these questions. We have so many amazing ones. I want to make sure we can get to as many as possible. So let's see. This one's a really good one, actually. I've been thinking about this too. Troy Wilderson or Wilderson, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, asks, do you prefer the short story form or the novel? Your description of a short story being like a Swiss watch struck me as telling and challenging and true, and I agree completely.
Great question, Troy. Thank you so much. And I love seeing you on Twitter all the time as well. One of my mentors, and I always look at everybody who influenced me, is a guy named John Biganates, professor here in New Orleans. And one time he was good enough to give me hours of asking him questions at a coffee shop as a novice writer. And he would talk about how his dad was a carpenter. And he said his dad could build a house all by himself. He could do the floor, the walls, the roof, the pipes, the electricity, all by himself. To me, being able to write a short story or a novel or an essay or a memoir or a play, they're all related. And it's kind of like, you know, if you're a singer, you know, you can sing like Aretha or Whitney or Beyonce or whoever it is. It all feels good in its own kinds of ways. I'm probably more of a natural novelist. That's where I came up thinking I was to start out with. But the process of becoming a short story writer was so enjoyable to me. It really made me understand writing in a very visceral way. So I couldn't do without either one of them. I mean, to be honest, if you put me, you know, it maybe like have to pick one for a year, probably the novel over the short stories. But then that being said, in my mind, the stories are bigger than they are on the page. Each story is its own novel, really. So I'm kind of cheating there. So to me, people's lives are so big, they can't be contained in a few pages. So I think very big. And really for me, the stories is like condensing those things down to a manageable size.
Yeah, and you're so good at endings, and I think that's part of the thing too that intimidates me about short stories in general, is just that ending. Like you got to stick it, and you stick it, but also like when I was reading, and still now I'm thinking about all of those characters and like if they were in universes right now, what they'd be doing, like where the story is continuing, you know. So you're just, yeah, inspiring again. I'm like, should I go back to some stories I started like 10 years ago? Maybe. Erica asked, awesome, this is a great question. As the conductor, did you have to divorce yourself from your personal beliefs and ideas to let the characters fully function as they need to in each piece? That is an amazing question. Thank you, Erica.
Yeah, and thank you, Erica, so much for that. Haven't seen Erica in a few years. I think it was Memphis maybe last time I saw you. It's been since 2018 or so, but it's good to see your face here virtually. And Zakiya, go back to those stories if you want to, or start some fresh ones. You never know.
I think, yeah.
I always say just have a good time, have fun with it, be wild. I'll bring in one more metaphor. So when I'm writing these stories, you know, there's the seance thing, there's the conductor thing, but also there's like the director of a film type thing. I want to let my actors improvise as much as possible. And I like that in the LA Times review of the book today, they said that like Ruffin is improvising, but really it's the characters. You know, I want my characters to have some sort of autonomy. If I know them well enough, I could ask them, so, you know, the city just towed your mother's car. What are you gonna do about it, kid? And then the kid kind of will respond to that in his own voice. You'll hear him talking about it and hear him talking to his mother about it. And that's the answer. It's not me giving the answer. Now, as the director, I have control of like the overall story. You know, you can't like hop in a car and go to Turkey or something like that, or so it's like, all right, these options make sense. Let's see what happens and see how it plays out. So for me, it's just again, it's just really just listening, and it's staying within the character's world and letting them have their own autonomy. I love to be surprised by my character's ideas, which are beyond me. I say that stories are smarter than the writer, because I can't think of all the stuff for myself. And in revision, a lot of ideas come from the characters, not myself.
Yeah, this makes me think of, hang on with me here. This makes me think of like an out-of-body transcendent experience kind of too, right? Where you are taking yourself out of your own prejudices in a way and leaning into the space. I think that's really interesting. I don't think I've heard anybody really talk about it that way too. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for that question, Erica. Also, I have to say, if you guys haven't noticed how just connected Maurice is, and Maurice knows everybody, like his Twitter presence, his Instagram presence, if you are not following him, please follow him. He is such a joy to follow and such a beautiful spirit to see on your timeline. So just go do it now, please. Awesome. Okay. I have another question here and please keep them coming. I think we've got time for a couple more. From Jaden Lopez, is there a story in this collection that almost didn't make the final cut? One that you didn't think fit, but eventually decided to include? So I like this question, because I know you mentioned there was a New Orleans story, right, that got cut, but this is a different side of that question. And so the other part of Jaden's question, if so, why, and how did you go about making that decision? That's really good.
It's funny because I'm not sure if I would have actually cut it, but people will always ask when you're making a book like this, what are the parameters? What is the book doing? And I had no idea. I'm like, well, these are just my stories. And I wrote these stories. And I had to begin slimming things down. So for example, I have a whole another book's worth of sci-fi stories, set in the future, set in alternate realities, you name it. So I cut those out intentionally. Then I say, what else? Well, I want the stories to all be geographically within the city. So there's a couple of stories that I love that are realistic stories. They're not in the collection. And then the last thing I said was I wanted my characters to all be African-American, New Orleans people. But the one place where I break that rule is in the one I read first, Mercury Forges. Mercury Red is a band I love, but Mercury Forges is the story. And if you'll notice in that story, the deputy who is trying to track down Mercury Forges, he's a white guy. His name is Deputy Benoit. It's a very white name from New Orleans. It's a very French name. So I kind of thought I could cut that story because of that, but I was like, no, that's one of the most New Orleans stories possible. He's being seen, from a third person point of view, but it's really Mercury's story. So I kept it on that basis.
That's really interesting. And I feel like that must be, I mean, they're kind of, do you see them as your darlings? I know everyone has different feelings about their writing. I mean, in a way, you have this for another time, right? Like it sounds like you're working on something else. I won't put you on the spot, or maybe I will actually ask you if you are working on something else right now, that sci-fi story perchance, because someone wants to know me, and I think maybe a lot of people want to know.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, my Twitter followers know very well what I'm working on, because I've been live tweeting it since like December.
Yes.
And I mean, the short version of it is that I am writing a novel that pays tribute to my female ancestors. It's set in 3 time periods: the 1860s, the 1940s, and like 2118s. That's like the sort of sci-fi part. And basically, it's showing the persistence of Black women in the city since like the founding, basically. And it's showing the community amongst them and their loved ones, and how they fight back against oppression, and they show their beauty and strength and intelligence throughout. And so I'm writing that book now. I'm like in the 3rd draft of it. And it's feeling wonderful.
Oh, that sounds really good. I can't wait for that. And going back to your Twitter presence, I have to ask. So, okay, I was going through, maybe this sounds a little weird, but I was going through some of your tweets because you have the most inspiring nuggets of wisdom, especially about writing. And one of the things you said, oh man, Oh, one of the things you tweeted was it's easier to beat yourself up for not writing than it is to write, which is something that I'm listening to that and thinking about that. But I have to ask you, like, do you get stuck? What do you do? What do you do when, I mean, it sounds like you run. It sounds like you run. You've got a lot of other healthy outlets of figuring it out.
Well, I mean, there was a cartoon in the New Yorker a couple days ago, and it was a picture of like a doctor's office, and the doctor's holding a puppy up to a man and saying, this is clinically shown to be effective against depression, for example, and anxiety. And running is the same way. I think that many of us hold a lot of anxiety. Today's world is just made to produce more and more anxiety. I think that writers are very sensitive people, obviously. And I think that we have to avoid hurting ourselves. So over the years, I've made different practices to get out of there. Like, I remember a long time ago, I had a special pen, and I kept losing it. So I couldn't write. I said, Maurice, no more special pen. Then I said, Maurice, people say you should write every single day. It's like, Maurice, you feel bad when you don't write. All right, no more shame over not writing every single day. I'll stop that. And then the last thing is, the sort of positive Twitter things is me talking to myself.
Yeah.
And I've seen that the positive energy helps me more. Like, for example, this third book, I wanted to start writing it 3 years ago. I've been delayed until a few months ago. But the weird thing about it is the early idea I had that I was stuck on is the idea I'm writing now. In other words, it was a good idea. I wasn't ready to write it yet, though. I had to keep on evolving. And so me researching my ancestors, my women ancestors, and learning about them became the actual substance of this new book. I couldn't have done that 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge some friends and elders also. I see Dr. Jerry Ward, who is one of the great scholars and poets of New Orleans, somebody I've looked up to for a very long time. It's great to see you, Doctor. I see Rebecca Solnit is here. My goodness. Oh, my goodness. Rebecca is an inspiration to everybody in the world and has been very kind to me in my writing journey since the very beginning. So it's wonderful to see you out there, Rebecca.
Yeah, so I just had one, well, actually, I think that might have been, sorry, I'm just going through my questions. You've answered everything and then some. Thank you for being, pun intended, an open book. I know for me, this has been really inspiring and such an honor to learn from you, to be in your presence. You have been such an amazing, I guess, mentor, even though it's all been through Twitter. I'm hoping we can meet sometime when things are safe and I can come see New Orleans because, I mean, from this book, again, everyone, pick this up, get this, grab this. It's amazing. You will read it and then you will share it with your loved ones, the younger ones in your family. I think that's beautiful too, that it's being taught.
Well, I have a question
or
for
hopefully
you
being taught.
before we start to wrap things up.
Oh,
Yeah, I have a
yeah.
question for you. You're taking care of yourself, right?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am definitely taking care of myself. I sold myself short earlier. I went for a run on Monday with my partner and I couldn't do a full 3 miles, but I was able to do a little exercise. And I think that's the thing. It's hard out there, and the internet and the news is terrible. So all of us need to take care of ourselves and make sure we're getting out as safely as we can and taking care of each other.
That's wonderful advice. I love it.
Well, thank you so much to City Lights. Thank you to everybody for your wonderful questions. And Maurice, again, thank you. This has been such a dream. A year ago, I would not have thought I'd be here. So it's just an honor. Thank you for this book. Thank you for your work and your presence.
Thank you for all that you do. It's been a pleasure watching you on your journey. I know it's only the beginning of it, and I can't wait to see what you do next. We are all waiting with bated breath, but more importantly, we want to see you succeed on your own terms. So keep doing your thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Right back at you.
Well,
Good night,
thank you,
everybody.
Maurice.